Now, the government announcement today from RCNZ is that skilled migrant dairy farm employees are able to return to New Zealand from overseas. Is this an absolute kick in the guts to the bulk application from the Rural Contractors New Zealand last week to the government on behalf of its members to bring in its highly skilled foreign workers to reduce the extreme staff shortages going into spring? Well, hang on, last time I checked, we're already now in spring. Joining us to discuss is Roger Parton, fresh out of a board meeting. Roger, what are your members telling you in terms of their skill shortages, and how much is this a kick in the guts when dairy get this?
Good evening, Sarah. Well, the application that we put in was for some 206 highly skilled agricultural machinery operators to drive the big harvesters and the big balers and such like. We were told by the government that that we couldn't make a bulk application, that each individual contractor had to make their own application, which now a lot of them have done, and everyone has been declined. And they've been declined on the basis, A, that the work is not uniquely skilled and that there are obviously people in New Zealand who can do it. If there are, we'd love to hear from them. And B, if the work is not time critical. So according to the government officials, it doesn't matter whether you harvest in December and January when the crop's ready, or leave it for 2 or 3 months until April and May when the crop's gone rotten in the ground.
I think we should get Chris Farfoy into a tractor and see if he's worked out whether this is highly skilled or not. This is ridiculous, Roger.
I think one of my members suggested we get him into a baler, actually, which is probably a little bit more unkind. Yeah. But it's one of those things that it's not necessarily the minister himself who knows or understands. It's the officials. And we've had problems over many years trying to explain to them what this particular role is. When we were doing the approval in principles, we actually had to take photos along of harvesters and big tractors and such like to show them the machinery that's being operated. And it's not just a question of driving it from A to B, it's a question of fine-tuning it, making sure it's operated productively, safely and efficiently.
So we had Andy Pender on Sarah's Country last week, probably one of my favourite interviews so far this year, Roger, from the New Zealand Airline Pilots Association. Listening to his words in respect of, he said, driving one of those, an agricultural contracting machine, is way, way more than he believed landing a Boeing. You know, the respect for where the technology is and driving skills is now is coming from an airline pilot.
I know, and I've been working closely with the Airline Pilots Association and Andy over the last few weeks. We did that on the basis that there was obviously some skills in both occupations which could be matched, and we put the two together. We found a whole number of pilots who've got a wide variety of licenses. A number have come from farms and big machinery in the past, and it was an opportunity to find them employment at the same time. Fill the slots that we need to fill. However, it's not quite that simple because a lot of these pilots are settled in their residences with their families in Auckland or Christchurch or wherever, and you know the work may be down in Winton or Oamaru, in the back block somewhere, and they, you know, to actually move them down there just for a 6-month period is highly disruptive to them, and a number of them just don't want to go.
Hey, so now let's talk about that, because we had Brian Cadogan, the Clutha District Mayor, on Sarah's Country last week, and they're pouring $500,000 of government funding into redeploying Queenstown's unemployed, especially coming off the ski season, into a jobs expo. And he believes that our industry is underestimating the past history potentially of some of the people that are stuck here from overseas that can't get home, that may have the ability to drive this. Is Rural Contractors New Zealand being open-hearted and open-minded to take a range of different skill sets and not just waiting for people to come from overseas?
Oh, I think we are, and what we've seen over the past few weeks is we had the SIT course in Telford, which was arose out of a couple of expos in Wanaka and Queenstown, and we had a number of people turn up from those. Some of them were from the hospitality, and some were just people who hadn't got a job at that stage. the skills of in the hospitality sector may not transfer across all that easily, but if the person's willing to work and is willing to learn and has got the basic skills of being able to drive a vehicle, it's a very good start. And I've had over the last few weeks, ever since my name has been out there in the public arena over this particular issue, emails from people 65 plus with all their licenses who have driven houses in the past saying, can we help? And I've circulated these around. So we've been getting people in from all sorts of walks of life and ages and levels of experience. If they want to be considered for a job, I'm more than happy to circulate their CV to all of our members to see if we can slot them in somewhere.
What an absolute wonderful thing to hear, because, I mean, if you're 65 and you're planning on going to sail around the Greek islands and you can't do that, you may as well help out. And it's excellent to hear. I mean, the likes of, say, for instance, Joel, he's, he's stuck here from Northern Ireland, can't get home. He said to me, I couldn't drive a tractor. You should see what he does with in terms of switching all of that equipment and all the lights and things like that. I know that sounds silly, Roger, but there's a lot of people that underestimate their ability to come into our industry. And I'm really like to know that we are being open to people who are extremely willing, and like you said, to move to these areas as well, because some people have no choices.
I think there are a number of our members who have sort of got this mindset that they've always brought in people from overseas because they haven't been able to get them in New Zealand, and that's the only way of doing it. I don't believe that to be the case. I think we probably still need some people from overseas to fill in the shortfall. But we're looking at every opportunity, and some of these machines are highly technical, and if can flick switches and manipulate electronics, that's one of the things that they need to do in the cab these days, because they're very, very sophisticated bits of machinery.
Okay, so when you had your board meeting, were you able to get a bit of an understanding around the numbers and what it's going to look like for the season ahead? I mean, we're here already.
No, we haven't got any numbers as such. I've been canvassing members recently to find out how they've been getting on, with the airline pilots and also with the applications. As I say, the applications have all been knocked back. There's 2 or 3 who have picked up airline pilots so far, and I think there's some more, working their way through it. But it's I think we'll probably end up with a shortfall, and the things that concerns me about that is that people will then either start using people who are not qualified and competent to drive the big machines, or they will drive them themselves, and you'll end up with a fatigue management issue. And either of those cases could be quite tragic, and that's the last thing we want.
Roger, are you talking closely with WorkSafe about this? With regards to your general concerns?
Not, because I know exactly what WorkSafe will say. They'll say the person conducting a business and an undertaking must ensure that the individual using the equipment is competent. But if you haven't got anybody who's competent, what are you going to do with it? And that's not WorkSafe's problem.
Roger, on behalf of
at the end of the
yep.
At the end of the day, it probably sheets home to the government.
Roger, I just wanted to say on behalf of the audience, we extremely feel your frustration, and I want to follow this closely, especially with today, this announcement coming through for dairy migrants to be able to come through. Why can't rural contractors be able to bring in those extremely highly skilled migrant workers that we need? And of course, I keep going on about it here. It's a health and safety issue, and the stress is getting real. Roger, thank you so much for what you do in your role, and to every one of your team at Rural Contractors New Zealand. It's an extremely stressful time, and please keep your chin up and keep the fight real, because it absolutely is.
This is Sarah's Country.